If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
Dr. Harry Sidebottom, author of the Warrior of Rome novels, presents his fourth instalment, The Caspian Gates. Diane and Bernie Lero share Danny's story, a heartwarming account of the transformation from a neglected child to a loved and cherished daughter. Louise Berridge presents the second book in the Chevalier series of historical novels, In the Name of the King. All these and other titles are available at themoreshow.co.uk/shop.
Welcome back. My next guest is author Louise Berridge. Louise began her career in television as a scriptreader and worked her way up the ladder to become executive producer of the BBC soap EastEnders. She eventually left the soap to become an established author. Her latest book, In the Name of the King, is the second in the series of historic novels set in 17th century France. I met up with Louise in Abergavenny to talk about her inspiration and the research behind the book. Well, Louise Berridge, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Louise, your latest book, In the Name of the King, just tell us a bit about the inspiration behind the book to begin with.
This particular one is actually the second in a series. It's the Chevalier series, which began with Honour and the Sword. And the inspiration behind the whole series is quite a simple idea of one man brought up with a rigid code of honour in 17th century France, but for whom circumstances have taught him humanity as well, and how does he cope with the two. In the Name of the King picks up directly where Honour and the Sword leaves off. It's actually, I think, less than an hour between the two. But it is really a standalone book. That's where I take that hero, that curious sort of hybrid that we've created and seen in an isolated world, and stick him right into the middle of the Three Musketeers Paris. It's full of intrigue and danger, political conspiracy, the 30 Years' War is going on. It's about the most dangerous conceivable environment to put in somebody who would anyway have to draw his sword to defend his honour. But this time we have a hero who would have to draw it to defend a serving girl. It's a recipe for disaster.
So where does the protagonist come from then? I mean, is that something that you feel very close with, or...?
In some ways, André came before even the setting. That was actually where I started, this idea of a man who has both honour, which is curiously inhumane, curiously clinical, and humanity. And actually that's why I decided to go into 17th century France, because that's really the only place you can actually play out that particular dichotomy in one man. He, for me, is actually the centre of the series, even though he's the person whose voice we virtually never hear.
Well, yeah, but that's what I was going to ask you as well. I mean, it's set in a particular era, isn't it? I mean, was there, quite a bit of research you had to do for that?
There was an enormous amount of research I had to do for that. I began so stupidly. I thought, I know a lot about 17th century France. I've read The Three Musketeers. I watched The Flashing Blade when I was a child. I had, I think, 3 general books on early modern France, the culture of 17th century France. And now I own about 287 books on 17th century France and know that I know nothing.
So, I mean, how do you begin a book like this, I mean, for yourself, and where do you start?
I started not even knowing I was writing a novel. Because I'd worked for so long in television, I was just thinking, I'm writing a story. If I thought about it at all, it was almost, maybe this is a pitch for a film someday. Because I didn't think I could.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you as well. I mean, so you would say that the idea behind this book is very filmic as well, isn't it? I mean, when you read this book, you can actually envisage this being a film, can't you?
Oh, I hope so. I hope so. I mean, that may be just because coming from television, I tend to look at things in that way. But actually, yes, I think it's tremendously visual. Swords always are. However we dress it up, they are one of the most sort of exciting visual forms of combat that there are. But this one, it would actually be very easy to film if anybody is watching out there who's got a few million to spare, because it's actually set in quite a small, confined environment. I mean, In the Name of the King is harder because you have got to do 17th century Paris. but there are still huge areas of it that are unchanged you could use today.
I mean, do you think you've remained very close to the era as well? I mean, do you think you've remained honest to the time as well?
I hope so. The most important thing, I mean, it's quite easy to stay close to the details of where were the buildings, what is the geography, who was in power at that time. But more important to me is what was the mindset, how did people actually think? And that's been much harder, because the only way you can really find that is primary sources, first-hand material, letters, diaries, court records. And that has been, in some ways, the most difficult and most disconcerting thing. In the name of the king, there is a sequence of torture. And for that, I actually had to look at transcripts, what happened during judicial torture. And I used a bit of it, actually. I used a line from the transcript in the book, because what to me was so horrifying was not let's have all the details of how this is done and what particular agony is. It's the mindset of bringing a man into a courtroom. The judge is sitting there. It's all very formal. Sign here to say you consent for us to torture you. Slightly strange. And there is the transcript. Somebody sat down in cold blood and wrote this. And the line was, oh God, oh help me, oh Jesus, oh God. You can see the clerk going, oh God, help me. Getting into the mind of a society where that seemed actually quite a reasonable thing to do, that was probably the hardest.
Yeah,
part
that does sound pretty hard, actually, to have to do that. But you've pulled it off, though. I mean, I've read the book, so it's a fantastic read.
Oh, thank you.
But then I just want to take it back to your time in TV as well, because it seems a very an amazing transition that you've written this fabulous book, but yet you were, in television. I mean, where's the transition there?
It's all storytelling. I don't think there really is any difference, except the glorious thing about actually writing a novel is that you're not only the writer, you are also the producer, you are the director, you are the casting director, you are the actors. When you write a script, you are actually strongly discouraged from giving too heavy stage directions. Never tell an actor how to say a line because they'll kill you, and the director certainly will. But here, in a way, it's harder because you have to do all those jobs yourself, but it's so much more satisfying.
Well, I bet it is, because I mean, obviously with your experience in TV, it must have been difficult sometimes where things go wrong, don't they? And to try to get it all together, where writing a book like this, you're in control. You're the producer, you're the director, you're everything, aren't you?
Yes, if the book fails, there is absolutely nobody to blame but me. But things can still go wrong with a book in exactly the same way. A story that you thought was going one way suddenly goes horribly awry. Or you find a piece of research you hadn't anticipated. And there were difficulties with timing, for example, in The Name of the King. If I hadn't been writing a historical novel, it's easy how you structure it. You say, well, obviously, here is the climax, and I don't want to give away too much here, but the climax happens at the chateau. You go straight into the final battle. Of course you do. Real life sticks a year in between. And you can cheat, but you can't really. Not with the Battle of Rocroi. I mean, it's so huge, it's so famous, it's so important. You can't. You have to actually use that time to develop the story in another way, and that was one of the hardest parts about the writing.
Absolutely. And I mean, what advice would you give to aspiring writers?
For television or for...
Well, for someone that's going to write a novel.
I would think the first piece of advice to give them is actually to write it. I come across so many people who say, oh, I've always wanted to write a novel. Do it. Just write it. If I can, anybody can. Because, as I say, I didn't even know that that's what I was doing. I just sat down and started typing.
I know, it's good. I mean, you must think to yourself sometimes that, wow, this journey that I'm on now, I never, slightly envisaged any of this, and yet here you are.
No, you're right. It's strange, because it's often only when you look back that you see all the different bits of your life and how they led to where you are. And you realise, actually, I couldn't have done without any one of them. The period of being a school teacher, that was incredibly helpful, particularly when it came to writing the younger boys in Honour and the Sword, because I had taught boys for so long. But also it taught you to try and articulate and to entertain, even when you're imparting quite heavy, serious fact. In television, I learned, obviously, about storytelling, But also one of the things when I was a producer that I think I learnt most from was being in the cutting room. When you learn how you can change the structure, that image next to that image. And it's one of the reasons I suspect in Honour and the Sword and in The Name of the King, I'm using the multiple points of view so that you can absolutely bang out of one POV into another, and that juxtaposition gives you something that's better.
Yeah, would you say that's a bit of a gift though? I mean, that's not how everyone does it, is it really?
It's not how everyone does it, and it probably won't be to everybody's taste. But I think anybody who is familiar with film or television grammar, which is actually, I think, pretty well most people, whether we know it or not, whether we know the right words, we know when a cut is wrong. We know when you can't jump time in a cut when it's wrong. And I'm hoping anybody who's able to follow that can follow this in exactly the same way.
So what sort of books do you read then in your sort of time for relaxing, when you get time off?
Yes, I believe there was such a thing as time for relaxing before publishing deadlines came in. But actually, I have read a lot of books like this, and my all-time favourite is George MacDonald Fraser, the Flashman novels. That was the first time I said to myself, I wish I could write a historical novel. Never thought I could, just thought, you have to know so much, I could never do that. But at the same time, I also read quite heavy literary books. I'm a great fan of 19th century, particularly Charles Dickens.
So where's the next novel, what direction will that take, do you think?
Well, the next novel that will come out is actually from a different series altogether, which is in the 19th century, with starting out with a completely different hero. And that's actually set in the Crimean War, which sounds as if it is completely different. But actually there are so many themes, there are so many overlaps in terms of the innocence. The Crimean War was even worse than the First World War from that point of view. These were young boys. England had not been at war for 40 years. Virtually every one of those 17, 18-year-olds who went out there had never been in action before, and they were into the full-scale horror and ultimately the trenches. It was absolutely appalling, but also a time of incredible courage and bravery, and I'm loving writing it.
Yeah, so one of my questions is, Louise, what's your favourite character in the book?
That's a really difficult one, because it's like asking a mother which is her favourite child, and in a way they're all, I suppose they're all me. But I think I have a really soft spot actually for Stefan. I know that I have huge pleasure in writing him. My husband says he can always tell when I'm writing Stefan because I hit the keyboard harder, because it sort of makes me feel like him.
And I must say, you must be very proud to be a Penguin author as well. I mean, it must be a huge achievement. I'm
just thrilled by that. You know, from a child, Penguin books, even I used to have Puffin Post and all those things. If I'd had to choose a publisher, Penguin was always my dream.
And Louise, where can you get the book from?
From all good bookstores.
Well, Louise, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Stay tuned as we'll be right back after this break.
Dr. Harry Sidebottom, author of the Warrior of Rome novels, presents his fourth instalment, The Caspian Gates. Diane and Bernie Lero share Danny's story, a heartwarming account of the transformation from a neglected child to a loved and cherished daughter. Louise Berridge presents the second book in the Chevalier series of historical novels, In the Name of the King. All these and other titles are available at themoreshow.co.uk/shop.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.